out in our lives as individuals, and how do we live this out as a church? So the continuation in this series is Zacchaeus' appointment with destiny. Jesus had a plan when he went from Nazareth in the Sea of Galilee down to Jericho. He knew Zacchaeus was waiting for him. And when he encountered Zacchaeus, he made a beeline for him. So it was Jesus fulfilling his destiny on his trip, but it also was Zacchaeus' destiny. His number was up. This was going to be a day that changed his life. So let's look at the trip, because I find it interesting. You know, I love history and geography, the way Pastor David loves science and technology. So you can't get by with a sermon that I don't have history and geography in it. So see up there the blue sea at the top? That's the Sea of Galilee. And if you look at the tip top of the Sea of Galilee is Capernaum. And to the left is Nazareth. And these are, it looks like whopping big distances, but you see the scale down below, and an inch is 20 miles. So Israel is a very small country. And some scholars say that it would only take 4 days to walk down to Jerusalem. My husband Jim lived in Israel, and he thinks, it would take longer than that. But it's still not a long distance. So Jesus set out to fulfill his destiny. He was headed for Jerusalem. We know all the events that unfolded. Jesus wasn't in a hurry, but he was determined, and he wasn't going to let anything stop him. He was going to get to Jerusalem, and he was going to fulfill prophecy the whole way down. And so from Jericho to Jerusalem, he fulfilled prophecy of going in to Jerusalem by the Mount of Olives. All of this prophecy from the Hebrew Bible, Jesus fulfilled in this journey. But he didn't take the straight road to Jerusalem. He took the hard road to Jerusalem. I have no idea why. Jesus does all these things, and we have no idea why he did what he did. But what he did is he took the red road, the one on the east, and he followed along the Jordan River. And if you look at the next slide, it's a rocky road. It's a rough road. So he chose this path to get to Zacchaeus. That's why I'm saying this was destiny. This was Jesus determined to do what he did. And you know, I took a bus trip from the Sea of Galilee to Jericho. It was like this. It was a heck of a trip. And up on the mountains, on the cliffs of the mountains, were these monasteries that had been built like in 500 or 300. They were ancient. So this was the ancient road. So this is the backdrop to the New Testament reading that we have about Zacchaeus. And what happened is Jesus took this road into Jericho, and he actually encountered the blind beggar Bartimaeus. So he healed Bartimaeus. That's a great story. I've got a whole sermon about that. So it's a wonderful thing. And then the people, the crowd, got so attracted to Jesus. All the news went through Jericho that a beggar had been healed and received his sight. So Jesus, if you can imagine him walking, and hordes of people behind him, and children behind him, and he's just carrying a big group of people in his wake. So that's the backdrop. So the reading is Luke 19, verses 1 through 10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." So this is I showed this artist last week, James Tissot. I really love his art, and this is a depiction of Zacchaeus in the sycamore tree and the crowd below. And Zacchaeus is clothed in very wealthy clothing and very different from the rest of the crowd. And I love the fact that there are 2 other people up in the tree also clinging to look at Jesus. And there's another person's idea of the scene. I don't know this artist, but he's a modern artist. And not only did Zacchaeus get up in the tree because he was short and couldn't see over people, Zacchaeus got up in the tree because he was a pariah. So he was very rich, and the reason he was rich is he was a tax collector. He was the chief tax collector. And the taxes were being collected to go to the Roman Empire, the despised Roman conquerors. And Zacchaeus could pretty much say that your taxes are whatever he felt like saying. The Romans did not care. He could tax the living daylights out of people. All they cared about was getting their portion. So everything was taxed: their olives, their grapes, their wheat, the fish they caught, everything was, the land itself, everything was taxed. And remember last week I said the people were poor, and they were all living on the margins, and they sometimes suffered famines. But when they didn't have famines, they had food shortages. And people were thrown into prison because they were poor. Now, fortunately, in the United States, we do not have, so far, debtor's prison. But these are people who were having, for the rest of their lives, to work out their debt so their family could live and sustain themselves. So when Zacchaeus says to Jesus immediately, it's like Jesus comes in town, wham, bam. He looks at Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus says, wham, bam. I'm going to give half my possessions and repay everybody 4 times. When I studied this in seminary, I said, I don't believe him. I do not believe him. I do not think someone would just randomly say, I'm giving up that much money. I sure as heck wouldn't. I don't think anybody could convince me to do that. So my teachers, was like, there's always one in every crowd, and I was it. The rest of the crowd thought Zacchaeus gave his money away and fine. It took me a long time to agree that this was a mystical, spiritual moment, a connection between Jesus and Zacchaeus. And if Jesus looked you straight in the eye, and Jesus said, I must be at your house today, wouldn't you say whatever it is you felt in your heart that Jesus was looking for? So was this hucksterism, or was this sincere? Was this his heart had been changed? Is it that he was a new person? And he was a pariah not just because he was rich, But Zacchaeus had to mix with the Gentiles to collect taxes from them, and he had to mix with the Romans to pay the taxes. This was ceremonially unclean. These people had not gone through the ritual baths and so forth that observant Jews followed. And so he was a pariah for many reasons. And the crowd is listening, and they hear that Zacchaeus is going to repay them. They must have decided them. And they see that something happened to Zacchaeus in his heart. So in the Bible exegesis I had to take for the ordination exam, which is a big deal when you're on your path to ordination, they wanted us to examine the word day, which is must. And Jesus used that word when he talked about going to Jericho and seeing Zacchaeus and being with Zacchaeus in his house. He said, I must stay at your home today. And it means it is necessary, it behooves, I'm required, I ought to, or it is my duty. So this was a big meeting, and this was a destiny moment for Jesus and Zacchaeus. So Zacchaeus immediately pops out what he's going to do to make up to everyone, to restore them. And it's restitution in the Bible. And it's a very biblical thing of restitution. And a couple of months ago, I went to a United Church of Christ service, and I really got a lot of meaning out of that service. And one thing the pastor said is we look for patterns in the Bible. And when you see the patterns in the Bible from, Genesis to Revelation, these are things you need to pay attention to. So we don't really look that much in the Hebrew Bible, but I think we should. And if you look in the Bible, restitution is very much a biblical concept. And it's not only making someone right financially, it's making you right with God. And so there's atonement, and it has to be genuine. It has to be heartfelt. Gold in it, and gold mice in it, hoping that God would lift the plague that came upon them after they took the covenant. So restitution is